questions for Coach?
Is this it? Yeah. It was a great game, I think, obviously. It shows you what this league is. I mean, there's so many things that can come up, and then the overtime is really exciting. I mean, we'd rather not been in that, but they did a great job kicking a long field goal, 4th and 15, coming back and tying the game. So it was a hard-fought game, but I still think we played well enough to win, and I think this puts us in the playoffs. So that was our first goal this season, was to get in the playoffs.
First of all, man, just happy Easter, man. There's a lot to be thankful for. Disappointing in the sense that, we still haven't won a game here in San Antonio. That's been the frustrating part for me as a head coach, man. I know how passionate our fans are. The support that they show week in and week out every time we come down here is just disappointing. I want to win not only for my players, but more for the fans than anything. I'm very thankful and appreciative of the support that they come out and pay their hard-earned money for us. It's just disappointing that we can't get a win at home. Hats off to Houston. They fought, clawed all the way through the game. It was an exciting game. I know the hierarchy here and within our organization, the XFL, anytime it comes down to the wire and the new overtime rule, the no overtime rule was a first for all of us. So I love it because it's every play counts in overtime. So they just executed better than we did in overtime. And I told the guys, man, to keep your head up. I mean, it hurts. It always hurts losing them. I would never get used to losing.
Welcome to episode 9 of the XFL Insider Podcast. Today you have your hosts Matthew and Drew in the house. We're going to discuss some XFL updates regarding last week as well as this week. Before we get right into the news and updates and game summaries, Drew, you got anything you want to share with the people at home?
I'd just like to say that Houston has clinched, and therefore we have no reason to continue clinching, at least until the playoff game.
Unclinch, Houston, unclinch.
By virtue of being clinched, yes.
Houston finally got the dub, so we are in the playoffs and ready to roll. It was a good game there, and we'll talk about it more later in the show, but I just want to share that I'm happy as you are, Drew. It makes watching the XFL much better when I know my team's making it.
Yep, and it gives them 2 weeks to figure things out, and I don't have to worry about it.
And that they need to do, sir. That they need. Now, as we go forward, we don't have much with the news today. I really didn't feel like anything was relevant in terms of speaking points. We have our TV numbers, of course, but much like we've talked about in the past, those are going to fluctuate up and down. We are happy we've made it through the March season. It was rough, but it's over. Now, I wouldn't expect much different coming into April with the USFL starting and many other things going on amongst TV. But with our TV numbers, I think we're fine. I'm not going to break them down. If you want to look at them, check them out. They're online. Drew, what do you think?
I think numbers are probably going to drop a little bit just due to USFL. I don't know. USFL, the one thing it really has on the XFL right now is a little bit more longevity. It's been around for 2 years now versus XFL, this being its first season. The USFL already has several fan bases with pretty decent followings, like Memphis, the Showboats, Birmingham, New Jersey was, I can't remember if New Jersey was the champion. I know it was New Jersey against Birmingham for the championship, but there's some established fan bases there, so it's gonna pull a little bit away from what the XFL is doing if there's any competition for time slots there. So we'll see how it goes, but I expect it to dwindle a little bit in terms of viewership. That said, there's the potential that it doesn't, just because we're closer to the playoffs. So it should be, I don't know. Bottom line, I don't know what to expect, but either way, it's not going to be bad. It's not like all of the viewers are going to jump to USFL or all of them are going to be on XFL. There's going to be some sort of split there.
Speaking of the USFL, most of those games take place on Fox, correct?
Yeah, so they have a contract with Fox, just like XFL has with ESPN. So it'll be on Fox and their affiliates.
Understood. So what that means to me is football galore come this weekend.
Yep, facts.
I mean, if I count right, we should be looking at 8 games in total.
Yep, it means I can turn into a veg again and watch all of them, take them in, do absolutely nothing with my life for 2 days. It's almost like it's regular football season.
Love to hear it, Drew. I'm right there with you, sir. But we won't be doing that too much, considering we'll be down in Houston for the Saturday 12:30 game.
That's true. That'll be a lot better time than just sitting there doing nothing. But I do still look forward to doing nothing after that. Actually, I can't say nothing. Jalapeno poppers will be had.
Share, please, share. All right, guys. That's it for the news. Let's roll on to the game summaries. So we had some good games this past weekend. I was entertained. People watching with me were entertained. The whole thing was enjoyable. Let's talk about the Vegas Vipers losing in overtime, 21-17 to the St. Louis Battlehawks. That game was in the Battledome in St. Louis. They had around 35,000 people in that game, and it was loud and rowdy. The game itself was pretty good. I enjoyed it. I thought there was a lot of good aspects on both ends, and considering McCarron was not starting and playing, I thought the backup did a decent job handling business. Drew, did you have any aspects or takes from this game that you wanted to discuss?
Yeah, I'm not 100% certain exactly how injured McCarron is. I don't know if he's out for an extended period or if they were just holding him out to be cautious. If they were holding him out to be cautious, they almost got lost on their gamble there. The backup looked good against Houston when he came in for a few plays. It looked like he had command of the offense. Honestly, it looked like he had pretty much command of the offense this past weekend as well. But it wasn't as efficient as McCarron, obviously. I mean, he can't just come in and beat AJ, right? So, if they held AJ out as a precaution, then they almost paid the price, because they're a few bad calls away from losing that game in regulation, much less overtime.
Yeah, from hearing the St. Louis Battlehawks coach talk, it was more precautionary. He could have played and was feeling pretty good, but they wanted to hold him for the next game. I don't know if I agree with that as much, but hey, not the coach.
Right. No, it was an interesting game. I've been pretty high on Vegas in terms of their offense, at least for most of the year, just in terms of their potential. And it seems like they got a quarterback that's kind of unlocked a little bit of that. So, it's fun to see an offense finally come alive. It's a little bit like watching Orlando come alive the past several weeks. Not mentioning this week, in that, because that would make me look wrong, which we all know I'm not. No, but I mean, we've all had fun watching Orlando come around. And I think it's just as fun watching Vegas come around and making a game out of that while they're in St. Louis in the Battledome and it's going crazy. 35,000 plus fans, man. That was just a good game to watch. It sucks that there was some officiating faux pas there, but it is what it is. Sports are always going to have that. You're never going to completely get rid of them. the XFL, tries its best to be impartial and to communicate and be transparent. It comes off weird sometimes when those bad calls get made. So I think that's something that we have to live with. And there's always going to be people that are claiming, oh, this is scripted, or this was, the XFL put the buzzer in Dean Blandino's pocket and made him say this, or whatever. People are always going to say stuff like that. I think this is about as close as you're going to get to strictly officiated and consistent officiating. So take the bad calls for what they are and live with them and move forward. But this was a very entertaining game.
Right there with you. Entertainment galore. The calls at the end kind of rubbed me wrong, but then again, it's sports. That's what happens. I will say that I was impressed by Vegas, their level of play throughout the game, not giving up. They took advantage of that second string quarterback. They got a couple picks off of him. They ate his lunch a little bit there during the game. I would have paid a lot of money to see that final conversion on that overtime go down to who was going to be the winner, though. That would have really been what clicked me in as a fan.
Yep, absolutely. And I feel like, man, Vegas, I'll say it again. I was just impressed with them coming into the Battledome and hanging in there, honestly, even with a backup quarterback, because it's not like they're prolific or anything. They have figured some things out on offense. But look at what having that little bit of offense has done for their defense. Like, their defense was able to hold an explosive St. Louis offense, even though it's explosive more in terms of being methodical, 20+ yard plays, but nothing, 40 yards plus usually.
Yeah, but they held up good up until that where the fake punt, the 64-yard touchdown. I was very impressed, but that was a good play as well. So
yeah, that was just perfect play calling in time.
Tiano went 19 for 34 with 194 yards. He had 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions.
Yeah, I mean, it's about all you can ask of a backup quarterback. You hope that he's going to have a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, not a 1-to-2. But you can't be upset with him. I mean, he came in. He's playing against. It's not a college defense he's playing against. He's playing against former professionals and current professionals, or not current professionals, but current semi-pros. This is going to be a lot harder than what it was in college. So we look at half the other quarterbacks in the XFL and wonder, where people found them, especially if they're on Orlando's roster. But it's not easy to be a quarterback at any level. It's not. So kudos for what he was able to do. He passed for 200 yards. That means he was able to keep the offense moving, generally speaking, enough to offset the run game and let them have a little bit of success in that. So, he was efficient. He in terms of keeping the offense moving. So you can't really fault him for much.
No doubt. Any other noticeable or notable people you want to talk about before we move on from this game?
Not particularly. I don't think anybody really had a huge standout crazy performance in this game. I think it was just a whole bunch of guys putting in work like you would expect, in general. When you have a team, you expect everybody to contribute. And I think really for both sides, it was one of those games where everybody contributed. It wasn't just one person carrying the weight of the team.
Yeah, with that win for the Battlehawks, it eliminated the Vegas Vipers from playoff contention. So they are officially out of the postseason with the Orlando Guardians. Saying that, I was still impressed by their level of play. They're not giving up. They knew the probability of winning that game was low, but they still tried. And so that's all you can ask for as a fan or a coach.
Yep, just make it entertaining. Don't make it boring and get blown out all the time.
So the next game we want to discuss was a great, entertaining one. The Orlando Guardians took on the Arlington Renegades. Arlington visited Orlando. Arlington won 18-16. That game was better than what I thought it was, but it wasn't very good either. So, Drew, what do you think?
I was about to say you went 1 for 2 on your descriptors there, because great was not something I would use to describe this game. Turn.
I mean, we actually got some points scored. I was happy about this points scored. If we can get anything but a 3-6 or a 3-3, it's more entertainment.
Well, you knew there was going to be points scored because Orlando is not the same Orlando as before, and Luis Perez was now going to come in. Now, granted, Luis Perez looked like a bag of smashed, you know what? He was not efficient really whatsoever. Kudos to him for coming in and being a leader and trying to get the guys hyped up at halftime, but I mean, it was bad. Quentin Dormady he ungracefully fell back to earth from the very first throw. You could just tell that. So I kind of compare this to how Cole McDonald was against the Battlehawks 2 weeks ago for Houston. From the very first throw, he just was not. It was not happening. Right? It just was inaccurate. There was no. You couldn't tell if there was any reason. You couldn't tell if he just was bad. For somebody who was a first-time watcher, if they watched that game, first question would have been, why am I wasting my time with this product? Right? Because it really looked like, I mean, honestly, if we're going to be honest, it was like if I'm watching that for the first time, I'm thinking, oh, this is not going to last.
I mean, you're definitely pulling teeth with that game. That was the field goal game of the week.
Horrible. I mean, offensive efficiency be damned. There were two good defenses on the field, but holy crap, the offenses couldn't do anything. And I'll give Dormady some credit. He had his team in it till the very end. He was, towards the end of the game, he started moving the ball a little bit, and he was able to do a little bit better. But he was getting sacked in the quick game. He would finally have time, and then he would throw it off target, or he would drop back and hold on to the ball and get sacked, which led to 2 or 3 turnovers in and of itself in that scenario. It was just horrible to watch. But a lot of people gave Terrell Buckley a hard time for his decision to go for what was it? He went for 1 to put it to where they could.
3.
Yeah. So for perspective, Orlando is one of the worst teams in the XFL at extra point conversions. They hadn't completed a 3-point conversion, much less attempted one, if I'm not mistaken, the entire season. So it didn't seem like it was a highly successful play. So what he did was he went for 1 to put him within 2 points, and then went for the kickoff and trusted his defense to get the ball back. And if the defense got the ball back, then all they needed was a field goal. They were 10 or 15 yards away from being out on a field goal attempt to end the game. If Dormady doesn't get sacked and fumble the ball like he had done, twice already in the game, then, we might be talking about Orlando squeaking one out. So, I would like to give a shout out to Coach Buckley and, acknowledge him in the fact that he knew his team and he made the correct decision in the moment. We can what if all day. If ifs and buts were fruits and nuts, it'd be Christmas every day, right? The idea that Terrell Buckley is a bad coach, I think that seems like I think that ship is sailed. I think Terrell Buckley is a decent coach. Won't go out on a limb and say that I think he's great by any means, but he is an efficient coach, and he knows his team, and he knows what he needs to get his team to do. And I think he's made small adjustments all year that have moved to that end. Bad game, bad product, but at the same time, if you've been watching all season, then you may have kind of expected something like this. So it may have taken the edge off of how bad it was.
Both fans of this franchise definitely expected this. I mean, I'm just being honest with you. Everybody here knew it was happening, and that's why I said I was impressed with the amount of points scored. Because my God, I thought it was going to be all field goals. I thought we were going to have 12 field goals apiece, and then half of those missed on each side. Yep. So, I mean, I'm right there with you, though. I'm impressed by the level that Orlando's been able to pick it up. Being the worst doesn't mean you have to play the worst, and they've shown that. So much respect to them and their coaching staff along this journey so far. This one was on ABC, right?
If I'm not mistaken, yeah.
So it's like XFL. Pick better games to put on ABC. Please. Please.
Or no, I think this one was on ESPN. I think we had.
This was ESPN itself?
Yeah, it was back-to-back ESPN on Saturday, and then
That's what it was,
ABC
yep.
for Houston, and who'd they play? San Antonio, and then it was ESPN2 for DC.
Yeah, regardless, it's almost the same. Pick better games. I mean, I want to be able to brag when I'm out watching this stuff with my gear on. I want to be able to hype it up. I don't want to have to say,
Right.
hey, let's watch them win this game by another field goal. I will say that too. I went out. I've been seeing it on TV as I go out and eat, go out and do things. I've noticed that it has been on at places when it's easy to find.
Yep. Yeah, if it's not on FX, usually it's on somewhere like a Buffalo Wild Wings or something like that.
Yep. So yeah, the game itself, Orlando had it until Dormady fumbled the ball there at the end. I believe they would have pulled off the win. That's just my opinion. So let's talk about our next game and our favorite team. The Houston Roughnecks took on the San Antonio Brahmas. The Roughnecks won in overtime, 17-15, and we took it down to the end. It was very, very entertaining. Drew, what you got?
It shouldn't have been. I've got it really shouldn't have been. I've got two things here that I want to do. First, I want to give props to San Antonio and Coach Hines Ward in that they never stop fighting in any game that they're in. They're always in it. They're always giving their best. They're always doing things to kind of try and change the landscape of what's happening, especially if it's going wrong, and do things better or do different things since they're not doing whatever that thing was very well. They're very good at adjusting. With that said, on the opposite side of the ball for Houston, their play calling and the idea behind their offense has been atrocious. So I'll give you Exhibit A of what really kind of set me off personally with watching how Houston conducted themselves on Sunday. Right before the half, Houston just got an interception. First thing they do, so they've got, if I'm not mistaken, they have one timeout left. They've got 20 or 30 seconds, and they just throw a ball up downfield. They just take a deep shot instead of trying to work the field, trying to get into field goal range, go up a few more points at halftime. They just give the ball back on a deep ball. It was an interception. What are we doing to put ourselves in better positions with our play calling? It seems like we're always going for the jugular, even in situations where it doesn't call for it. Now, I'm not saying we should have gone, completely conservative and held the ball, run time down, all that stuff, right? Obviously, we would have had to pass the ball to get down there. But throwing a ball deep down the field into double coverage, and on top of that, it's not even a good throw. The idea of that really just blows my mind. I don't understand the play calling at times. This has been an issue since week 3 at at Houston when San Antonio came to town. When Houston in the third quarter got really, really conservative, it came down to a goal line stand, basically to keep the game from being tied. And really, since that game, Houston hasn't been the same. Their offense it's not been dominant. Yeah, I've blamed it on the loss of John Trey Kirkland, but more and more that I watch, a lot of it's play calling too. You're taking shots against defenses that are looking to take the top off of the offense. You're not really taking what's underneath. The first slant that I recall seeing completed was by Cole McDonald on the 2-point conversion that won us the game. So I don't know. It really just kind of blows my mind sometimes what we're doing on offense. I know we want to be aggressive. I know we want to score. I know we want to take shots. But sometimes that's just not what your offense is. And ever since John Trey Kirkland left, that's not what the Houston offense has been.
It's rough to watch. From the beginning when we were busting these big plays to now we're not busting anything. It's hard. God for our defense.
Yes.
They really come through and shine a light of hope.
Trent Harris, Jack Heflin, Devontae Beckett had a hell of a game. Good God, he was everywhere.
Yeah, he was good.
Multiple there's for loss, couple sacks.
There's many names that I could spout from that defense that I'm impressed by.
Yep.
But yeah, like you said, it's questionable of our play calling. It's almost since we played Seattle, we're kind of scared, or we're We're not playing the same football we played the first few weeks.
Yeah,
Maybe that's just my
it's not
opinion.
that they're scared. It's the different brand of football, and it's not even that. I think it's being overconfident in who you are. You have to know who you are as an offense. You have to know what you do well and what you don't do well. Ever since John Trey Kirkland left, we haven't thrown the deep ball well. So, he's injured. We've got to move on. We've got to revolutionize how we do things. Let's take what the defense gives us and quit with the over-the-top attempts. Like, yes, you have to take 1 or 2 per game, or 3 or 4 per game, rather, to really make sure that the defense actually respects it and see if you can't catch them falling asleep. But when you're up by 3 and you have plenty of time to move down the field to get a field goal, that's not one of the times that you do that.
Yeah, no doubt. The second half of this game, if I remember right, no points were scored except by the San Antonio Brahmas, right?
Yep.
Yeah. It was hard to watch. I'm a huge fan. I'm glad we won, but Lord have mercy.
It was rough.
It's tough. Yeah.
But it didn't look as bad as the Orlando and Arlington game, so that was good.
No, sir. But coming into the playoffs, we definitely want to be at our best. If we started our worst, it's not going to be too good.
Right.
I was excited. Cole McDonald got a little more comfortable. He seemed like he got a little more comfortable in his position and his duties.
I mean, he threw a strike on that slant.
Yeah,
that was about as perfect of a throw as you can get.
I'll tell you another thing I noticed is those QBs are taking some waylay shots in the backfield. They don't always show them on TV, but these guys are getting knocked out sometimes.
Yeah. Silvers literally said in the post-game presser, he pretty much subbed himself out. He was like, look, Cole McDonald usually does the 2-point stuff for us. It's like, I got a little banged up. They got to me on the first 2-point conversion attempt. So I was like, it's probably better that Cole goes in.
Yep. And I'll say before we move on, the Brahmas, they came up, they scored, they kicked a field goal, they tied it up. They wanted to win. There were many, many aspects in this game watching the Brahmas that I question their coaching, though. And I'm not going to get into it specifically, but there were multiple avenues where I was questioning, what the hell are you doing? Why are you calling that? I mean, there's many.
Yeah, well, I mean, even Hines Ward was, I think he was quoted exactly as saying, we're getting sacked in the quick game? How? Because quick game throws are supposed to be 2 steps and let go of the ball. And if you're already getting sacked before you get the ball out, then something bad is happening. So, I mean, there's only so much you can do in coaching. And that's why I mentioned kind of in my breakdown there that they did enough to adjust away from that. Now, Houston played a part with penalties and egregious kind of stupid penalties on defense. But San Antonio all season has had to make adjustments based on that type of thing, and they've done a good job of it.
Well, my example, we'll talk about it real quick, was I think it was the first quarter, maybe 3-4 minutes, maybe not even that into the game. Hines Ward challenged a penalty. Do you remember seeing this?
Yeah, that was the hands to the face or the face mask or something like that.
Now, we weren't on a 4th down. We weren't on a key conversion. We weren't doing anything to change the actual play of the game. And we use our challenge then for that. So that was just one of my examples of me questioning that I don't really understand that. And personally, you could tell from watching on TV. I mean, he was about that. That was his penalty. So.
Yeah. Well, not the penalty or the challenging thing is something that really not a lot of the coaches have gotten a good grasp of. I think Coach Becht has done a good job with it. Houston definitely hasn't done a good job with it. They've been terrible about the penalties and challenges.
Agreed on both those.
Orlando's tried a couple of times. Vegas has tried and succeeded a couple of times. But I think Coach Becht in St. Louis has done the best job with the challenge situation. The idea behind it is new. The function of it is new, and coaches are hesitant to give up that timeout because timeouts are so valuable, right? So especially when you have conservative style coaches like Coach Phillips, he values the timeout more than he does a drive usually, because that timeout could come in handy down the road if your defense, stands up. So all the coaches, they've got their rhymes and reasons for either doing it or not doing it, but it is a new mechanism, and it's something that each coach is going to have to grow into using.
10-4. Before we move on, Jake has entered the chat. Jake, how are you today?
Well, let's just say this past week has just been complete chaos. You know, the severe thunderstorms from the past couple of weeks have really had my sinuses in overdrive, and it's still somewhat on the up. You know, actually recovering, but knowing that hits allergy season, it's just going to be a nightmare this year.
The mold count in Missouri and Illinois is no joke.
Yeah, I'll stay south where I don't have to worry about that. Thank you. Well, Jake, did you have anything to add on that game, the Orlando Guardians versus the Brahmas? Anything before we move on?
Unfortunately, I think the only game I actually watched this weekend was Vipers Battlehawks, so I'm probably not going to be very good on analyzing any of this week.
Understood. We've already talked about the Battlehawks, but once we hit back into it on game previews, I'm sure you'll have enough there to take it from there. Is there anything you want to add about the game from last week with St. Louis before we move on? You can add, but just quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could. I know it kind of takes things out of order, but I mean, you just do what you got to do. You make your executive decisions there. I really think that this was a real nail biter. I know some of my colleagues at Ambush Sports might disagree with the outcome, but I mean, it is what it is. Things happen. Had to go to overtime. For some reason, I do think that the offensive pass interference call on one of the attempted conversions in overtime on Vegas was actually justified. I mean, if you look at all the angles, even after the fact, when the game is over with, thank goodness for DVR where you can watch that stuff over and over and over again to your heart's desire until you're blue in the face. I mean, without a doubt, I should say. I mean, there was obvious pass interference there, so I mean, I think the right call was made there on determining that one was no good. And then, of course, you go from there, and St. Louis makes both of their conversions, and then Vegas misses their second conversion. I will admit, I do like the best 2 out of 3 format. It reminds me of the best of 5 scenario when it comes to a shootout in soccer. So I love these shootout rules. And the fact that Battlehawks Vipers had to be the first one in league history, even if you're going all the way back to the first iteration, first time in all history that it's gone to overtime, but played under these rules. I like it, and the fact that this wasn't the only game this weekend that actually went in overtime, considering Houston, San Antonio also went in overtime. I just like to see how this is exercised in the future going forward.
Yeah, to add on to that, I feel the same way about it. The shootout style, I like that they kept it to 3 and didn't do 5. Keeps it more punctuated, keeps the fans on the edge of their seat for the entirety of it. If it does need to extend past 3, then, they go past 3, whatever, until they have a winner. So going back and forth like they do and having it be from the 5-yard line rather than from the 2 or the 10, I think they hit the nail on the head as far as the rules go. I think the production on the first overtime game was kind of marred a little bit, or the system was kind of marred a little bit by, like it or not, controversy over the calls. Whether they were right or wrong, people still got upset. There was controversy over it. The like I said, the product was kind of marred a little bit by that. But I think between that and the Houston San Antonio overtime, I think the rules of overtime really shone through. And honestly, I think that's a far superior product to even what the NFL has as overtime. I think it punctuates the playing period. It means you have less injuries due to fatigue. Really, it's a net positive all the way around. I think that's something that the NFL in the future should adopt. Whether or not they do, to be quite honest, I don't really care. The XFL, I think, has it right in this one. They've got it right on a couple of things when it comes to player safety. But overtime is is just another iteration of that, or another proof of that, so to speak.
Yep. Well, both takes. I agree with both of y'all. The format itself is exciting, with the exception of those calls. It reminds you almost of a hockey shootout. So it's very enjoyable. I hope that we don't see calls be the basis of the results of these overtime games, so because it really just sucks the fun dry.
Yep.
Okay, so then we just discussed the overtime and as well as St. Louis Battlehawks just a little bit since Jake came in late. Let's go into the DC Defenders. They took down the Seattle Sea Dragons 34-33. That game was in Seattle. It didn't look like there was that many people present, but man, it was loud on TV. A lot louder than I thought it was going to be. This game itself, I will say, in my opinion, was the best of the week. I enjoyed it, all aspects of it. So, what do you guys think?
I mean, it had everything. It had points scored. It had defensive plays made. It had deep shots taken and made. It had Ben DiNucci interception.
It had Ben DiNucci dropping many F-bombs.
Yep. I mean, this was the game to watch if you were new to the XFL this weekend.
Temamu had a great game. He threw 4 passing touchdowns, and I don't think he had an interception the whole game, and that's good for him because he's threw a few this season. All in all, DC looks like a stellar team, and then we knew Seattle did as well.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure what happened last week when they played Orlando, but man, it's going to take a lot to knock DC off that high horse this year. I don't know that there's a team that's capable of doing it. To be honest, maybe the only team that is capable of doing it probably is Seattle. That's going to be determined though really by a game that is played between Seattle and St. Louis. Is that this week? That's not this week. That's next week, isn't it, Jake?
No, that's this week.
St. Louis and Seattle matchup.
Yeah, St. Louis, Seattle. That's correct.
It's Sunday on the 16th. Yes, sir. It's this week.
Okay. So yeah, that's going to determine who's probably going to end up going against DC. I would imagine. Man, DC's just far and away the best team in the league. They are. They've had a little slip up against Orlando, but they don't have the same proneness to throwing interceptions or turning the ball over or anything like that some of the other teams do. They don't have a whole lot of questions on offense. They've got very few questions on defense. Their special teams is pretty decent. It's hard to see anybody really taking them down.
Yeah, I'm not sure that they can be taken down at this point. If they do, is it just a fluke? They have a bad day?
I mean, when it comes to playoffs, if you have a bad day, then that's it for you. You can't really lay claim to anything after that. So for them, the biggest 2 games of the year are going to be the 2 playoff games. For Seattle, I think that game against DC on Sunday was the biggest game of the year for them. They needed that, and they came up just short. Now, it was a game that came down to the very end, and it was they ended up going for 2 when they were down by 1. And missing it, and then trying to go for the 4th and 15. But that's just decision making as far as the coach goes. That's something that if you had an offense like Seattle, you probably would feel comfortable in doing that as well. I don't have any problem with them making that decision. It made the game far more entertaining in a game that was already highly entertaining. I mean, like I said, if you're a new watcher and you watch that game, congratulations, you just witnessed the height of the XFL this season. There's been a couple of games like that. Seattle was involved in a couple of them. Their game against Las Vegas in week 3 was nuts to watch. So I think both of those teams are very good, Seattle and DC. And I think you may have seen a preview of the playoff game. Honestly, that's just my opinion. DC against St. Louis, but there is a game to play, Seattle against St. Louis, and that's going to have some, obviously the Battle Squawks are going to have something to say about that.
Caw-caw.
Right.
Ben DiNucci, he was the first player in XFL history this season with over 2,000 yards of passing. So good job there, Ben. My question is, who's going to be MVP, him or AJ McCarron?
To me, it shouldn't even be a question. That's got to be AJ.
I'm voting your way as well. Who knows? But
DiNucci's got too many interceptions to be in that conversation. I think AJ's the runaway MVP.
No doubt. No doubt. I know a lot of Seattle fans that will want to argue with you, though.
Well, that's fine. They're allowed to be wrong.
They're allowed to argue and be wrong.
Yep.
You got anything to add, Jake, before we move on?
I think I just did.
All right. So that's it on our game summaries. Once again, it was a good weekend of games. In my opinion, it was one of the most enjoyable. Being able to watch the games back to back as well was something I enjoyed also. So hopefully we keep it up. As we go into the game previews, I just want to state, and for everyone that's listening, keep in mind all games are shown on ESPN Plus as well. So that's the app. We don't state it always, but you can find all games on there if you have that subscription. So, all right, so let's talk about some game previews. First up, we got the Vegas Vipers versus the Houston Roughnecks. That game is Saturday, April 15th at 12:30 p.m. Eastern, and it is on ABC. That's an early game. Drew and I will be in attendance. Looking forward to this one, as it will be the Houston Roughnecks' last regular series home game. Drew, what's your expectations for it? Are we going to look at an actual game with the Vipers, or are we going to run over them?
No, it'll be an actual game. Unfortunately, I think really looking at who Houston is now, taking into account their kind of play calling inefficiencies, we'll call it, and looking at what Vegas has found and the fact that they can actually score on offense, Houston's going to actually have to try to beat them. This is not going to be a walkover win. Houston's favored by 6.5 at home with a over under of 43.5. Obviously Vegas knows something that we don't, because I don't think Houston is going to win by 6.5, 7 points over anybody for the rest of the season. I think Houston has only tough games in front of them unless they change drastically in play calling. So looking at 6.5, I'm not looking at Houston to cover that. I'd probably take Vegas. And over under 43.5, I'm looking at probably the under. I think we're looking at most likely I think scoring wise, it probably could be something like the Orlando and Arlington game, just with touchdowns and not field goals, 18-16 or 20-18 or something like that. I don't think that they get to 43.5, 44 points in this game.
I'll mess with the over-under on this. Yeah, this is going to be under for sure, in my opinion. In terms of the spread or the money line, I don't really want to mess with it. Houston's my team. I don't want to. I've been disappointed too many times already. So it is what it is. Now, I'll tell you, if Houston doesn't come out ready for Jalen McClendon, there's going to be some issues. He had a good game last week. He's a stud. The guy's ready to play. He's not Luis Perez. He's moving. He's jiving. He's throwing the ball. So I think we'll be okay with our defense as far as I'm concerned to shine through this game. Any names that we haven't seen?
Not particularly. Well, I guess I can't say that. I think Houston's run game may actually show up again this week. I think it's, Max Borghi, Bryson Aline, Deja Lee. I think those three guys are probably going to have pretty decent combined day. Houston has outside of the first three games, Houston's pretty much been running back by committee. I think after Max Borghi got clipped up a little bit against San Antonio, they kind of tried to rotate a lot more. The idea that I think St. Louis really had a decent time on the ground. What's y'all's running back's name, Jake? Is it Brian Hill?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that would be correct.
Yeah, so, Brian Hill had a pretty decent day on the ground. I think Vegas really has been run on pretty much all year. DC exposed them a little bit with De'Aaron King, but even when it's not a quarterback, I think Vegas has been weak against the run pretty much all year. So, I look for Houston's running backs to have a pretty decent game. I don't necessarily expect it to be high scoring, though.
Understood. Yeah, I expect the Houston defense to play up. May not happen, but after last week, they should have a good game their way.
Yeah, Jake, how do you feel about the 6.5 point favorites for Houston and the over/under 43.5?
I think I'm just going to stay out of that one. I wouldn't touch the action on that with a 10-foot electrified eel.
Yeah. It's I don't know. The spread on this one, I probably would not. I don't know. Like I said, I'd probably go against the spread on this one, and then I really don't see a whole lot of points being scored. But watch, I'll be wrong.
Yeah, it's unpredictable sometimes. I know we'll get our stuff going and our thoughts and opinions, and then we'll watch the game and all that shit goes out the water. All right, so we ready to move on to our next game? Next game is the Orlando Guardians versus the San Antonio Brahmas. That game is Saturday, April 15th at 7 p.m. Eastern. It's on ESPN2. This should be a good one, guys. Are y'all ready? Are we excited?
I think there's a lot more to be excited about in this one than there was for Orlando and Arlington. I don't see Orlando being as bad as they were last week on offense. San Antonio is going to have a little bit better chance to win in this one. San Antonio are 1.5 point favorites right now.
Wow.
And the over/under is 39.5. Yeah, that's tough because San Antonio has no offense. Orlando may or may not have offense. And Vegas is basically saying, yeah, we don't know who's going to win. Seriously, if it's anything less than a 3-point favorite for the home team, then if it's within 3 points, then they just don't know.
Gauging from what we know that the Brahmas are going to have a tough time scoring unless they're kicking field goals. The Guardians, on the other hand, have had some successful times recently, and explosive successful times where they score when you least expect it.
Yep, and even last week they still scored 16 points, after turning the ball over 5 times. So they have the ability to score points. That's not a question.
Yeah, so I wouldn't go with the spread on this, personally. As far as the over-under, that's going to be under for sure, and I would bet on the last game before I bet on this game, just to be honest with you.
I kind of feel the same way. I think Orlando wins outright, so that's where my money would be, and I would probably play the under, honestly, on this one as well.
Yeah, I would say the under. I just don't know who I would say is going to win. With these two teams, they're just swapping back and forth, so I'm not even sure.
Yeah, it's kind of a squabble.
Yep, I like Orlando just because of our previous talks, so I'm going to say Orlando on this, and I want to say they're going to win by at least a touchdown.
What do you think, Jake?
I think just like the last one, this is just action that I'm not interested in because this situation is about as ugly as when Orlando went up against Vegas, and yeah, that's a big oof. I mean, even if I had attempted to take any action on this, I hope that ill shocks me because it'd be a bad bet. Yeah. So, I mean, that's all I can say on this game.
Yeah, you're basically a coin flip with who wins this one. But if I had to put my money on anybody, it would probably be Orlando just because they've shown the ability to score.
Understood. I wish we could swap the Houston game for the night game with San Antonio. That's just me.
I don't know. I'm not willing to put Houston in public view quite yet. I have concern.
Well, we'll be there, sir. So we're going to be there front and center.
Hopefully they put beer in the media fridge again. We may need it.
Okay, before we move on.
You guys are probably going to need a lot stronger stuff than beer, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, that may be facts.
Get spirits out. Anything else before we move on, fellas?
Nah, that's with the next one.
Okay, we got the Arlington Renegades versus the DC Defenders. That game is Sunday, April 16th at 12 p.m. Eastern, and it is on ESPN. That game is in DC. Should be a good one for those fans there, and we should all expect what's going to happen here. But hell, they played Orlando in the Twisted South, so who knows? What you think, Jake?
Honestly, I don't know what to expect. I mean, obviously, I would love to see the second loss of the season for DC, but they're on their home turf, so it's going to be difficult. But, I mean, if something in that playbook that hasn't been used by Arlington somehow leads in that direction, then I'd say, you should have brought out those plays weeks ago, because you wouldn't be languishing in the position you are ranking in the, not only in the power rankings, but also, your overall standings. So if there's something that magically gets pulled out of the coach's ass when it comes to plays that haven't been used at all this season, and they can push the situation to where, it may be within points of DC. I mean, as you can tell, DC probably had the worst performance of the year as far as point differential with their opponents, because if you look at it, Seattle had them down to a point. And I mean, it could very well be this scenario where it's held down to a point, but it won't be a point in favor of DC. It could potentially be a point in favor of Arlington. And if that's the case, then Arlington manages to pull an upset and gives DC their first loss at home.
Anything can happen in football, except for that. No, honestly, Arlington's defense has been fantastic this year. They've been over the moon good. They basically won them the game against Orlando last week. Their defense did. I don't see them faring the same way against DC. DC's way too good on offense, I think, to be slowed down entirely. I don't think that Arlington has the ability to score more points in any shape, form, or fashion than DC. DC would have to throw probably 3 pick sixes for Arlington to outscore them. Like it would have to be an all-time bad performance by the DC defenders for them to lose to Arlington, I think. Vegas odds have the defenders 8.5 point favorites at home and a 41.5 over under for that game. So they don't seem too bullish on Arlington. They seem pretty damn bullish on DC for good reason. I'm always for an upset. I think it would be cool to see Arlington win against DC. It would add a lot more high drama to the remaining matchup for Houston against Arlington next week, and more so in the playoffs. It would be cool to see happen. I just don't see it happening. So 8.5 points at home. I think DC covers that. They're probably going to win by a couple of possessions. I think this game is probably going to hit the over as well for 41.5. And DC will probably have most of those points. Actually, no, I think this is going to hit the under. More now that I think about it, I think the under is going to hit because Arlington may not score at all.
Before I even remark on the lines, let's just say, psst, psst, hey, script writers at XFL, I think we were giving you an idea to play off of here. But as far as the lines, what is it with this week with the first 3 games so far where none of the lines look even remotely attractive to me? I mean, that's probably the first time this year where I've had 3 consecutive games not even be remotely appetizing for me. And I'm sure that's probably the case for some others out there, because I know it's not just me. So, I mean, I can't take any action on this at all.
I agree with the lines. They're a little disappointing. I'll take defenders on this, on the spread. As far as the over/under, let's just say I'll take the under as well. I mean, oh no, Perez may come out and start swinging. I'll take the over. I'm gonna take the over. Yeah, that's what I was saying though. If Perez comes out and he's ready to play, I think we'll have a better game than what we think. That DC defense is middle tier. It's not the greatest. It's not the worst, and they play really good at home. So, I don't know, man. I'm hoping for something here, but you guys are probably right. I'm probably just reaching.
I think sky's the limit for Arlington, and unfortunately for them, the sky happens to be right around 12 points.
So essentially what you're saying, Matthew, is they play like a bunch of mids.
I mean, yeah, but that could be worse. And considering Perez just got shipped over, they're doing better with Perez than what they did with the other two guys they had. If you're speaking of the DC defense, yeah, they're definitely mid-tier. They're not high tier. They're not the worst, but they're not the best. Let's see, I seen a stat right here. The Defenders defense has given up 36 points to the Guardians and then 33 points to the Sea Dragons in the last 2 weeks. That's pretty significant considering it's the Guardians.
DC's been dealing with some injuries on defense. Mike Joseph has been injured for several weeks now. I think he came back last week, he came back and played on Sunday, but I think there's question as to how healthy he is. I think he's kind of toughened it out and running the home stretch for DC, trying to keep the troops rallied on defense. Really, he's their big playmaker, so with him around, I think their defense is better. But I think you're right. Their defense is not all that great.
Before we leave it behind, guys, anything else you want to share on it?
Don't believe so.
All right, let's talk about our last game, the Seattle Sea Dragons versus the St. Louis Battlehawks. That game is in St. Louis. Is that correct, Jake?
That is correct, at the Battledome.
And it takes place on Sunday, April 16th at 3 p.m. Eastern, and it is on ESPN. I'm ready for this one. It should be a good one. What you got, Jake? Our local Battlehawks expert.
You know what I almost would have hoped we would have had just to discuss this game? Having our resident Seattle guy here. Apparently he wasn't available. But I mean, I could definitely see that this could be a rather close game, compared to their last matchup. The outcome of which direction that win may go toward is going to be a little bit difficult to tell. I'm sure that McCarron will definitely be back at quarterback this coming weekend because, McCarron put himself out on a week where he wasn't exactly 100%. So, he should be well rested and ready to go and, knock Seattle off its little high horse or whatever you want to call it. But I mean, I could see it could be a good game regardless of the outcome. Obviously, I'd want St. Louis to make their second consecutive win at home, in this final 3-week stretch. And the fact that right now they're 2-1 at home at the Battledome. I mean, that's a statistic that can't be ignored right now. So hopefully, if they can make it 3-1, there is a very good possibility that could be the case. But then again, the final homestand this season is against Orlando, and I mean, not a whole lot can be said about that one.
Upset alert. I'm kidding.
Probably not.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, it should be a good one. This is going to be a nice one considering McCarron's coming back from his little vacation. Now, I will say this is for second place of the North, right? Isn't that correct?
I believe that is the case.
So it should be a good one.
Yeah, so I'm going to look up and see what the records are while you guys go back and forth about these odds. So St. Louis is a 1-point favorite, even 1 point at home, and the over-under is 46. So you guys play with that. I'm going to look at the records real quick and see what I can't glean as far as what this game means exactly.
So they're taking... I don't want to say the over on this, but I feel like the probability of these points to be scored is here if any game this week. That's just my opinion.
The spread I'm definitely not comfortable with. I mean, obviously, if they were able to, I'm trying to remember. I think the last matchup, the Battlehawks had beaten Seattle by 2. So, I mean, if that potentially became a scenario, then obviously, it would definitely be going over that 1 that St. Louis is currently favored. So, that's that part. The spread I wouldn't be comfortable with. Don't even bother touching the money line unless you've got 4 sets of balls and
insider knowledge,
insider knowledge, and you've probably got a few $1,000s sitting around.
I like the spread because the fact that Seattle can't really seem to convert on many 2-1 threes. They're not very good at converting after they score. So I think that I like that +1 there, just to be honest.
But on the over-under, I do think there's a very good prospective possibility that it could definitely go over.
Yeah, so I feel I wouldn't bet. I mean, again, this is a coin flip, right? It's within 3 points for the home team. So, St. Louis being the 1 point favorite, that's a coin flip. I wouldn't put money on that. As far as the over-under, I think the over hits. I think both teams are going to score well into the 20s, possibly one team in the 30s. In terms of what this game means, so right now, obviously the defenders have locked up home field advantage. They're good to go. The Battlehawks are 6-2 and 2-1. No, excuse me. They're 6-2. Their 2 losses came against the defenders, so they are 1-2. So they're 3-2 in the division. The Sea Dragons are 5-3, and they've lost both of their games to the defenders.
They should be tied, right?
Yeah, they'll be tied as far as overall rankings in the standings. So they'll be 6-2, and if Seattle wins, then they'll be both 6-2, and it'll come down to the tiebreakers, which tiebreakers would be head-to-head, which they've split that. Then it would be best win-loss percentage in division games, which I think St. Louis holds the edge in that right now. Should it go past that, it would be strength of victory in all games, the combined record of opponents in the wins. So basically, who had the wins against the best opponents, and it goes on from there. But there's like 8 or 7 different things that need to happen before it gets to a coin toss, which would be scenario number 8. So, a lot to play for both teams in this. St. Louis wraps it up if they win. Seattle, sticks their head in the race, and then both teams next week look like they're going to win because Seattle plays against the Vipers and the Battlehawks play against the Guardians. So the odds right now are on the Battlehawks side to make it, I think. But I mean, we'll have to see. It'll be close.
It should be a battle. And I'm thinking that these fans in St. Louis are going to show up even more than previous games for this game particularly. I was surprised at the amount of fans last weekend there, just because of the holidays.
Yeah, they've sustained pretty well across their home games. It's been impressive, really. Nobody else in XFL can say that they've had any kind of consistency, really, or any kind of growth from their original home game. Houston had 1,000 more at their last home game, but that's, when you're talking about 11,000 people, that's not super significant. St. Louis has been the class of attendance, since the inception of the league. So not a big surprise there, but it is impressive.
So before we move on from the battle of MVPs game, anything you guys want to add?
Be careful what you do with your money this week.
All right, that wraps up the game previews for next week. As we go into the power rankings with Drew, keep in mind these are his rankings and he makes these decisions. We trust his expertise and his knowledge, though. So, Drew, could you please present us with this week's power rankings?
That is right. All of my selections are correct and 100% inarguable. No.
All Supreme Master.
Right. So I could get used to that. No. So DC obviously going to stay at number 1. I think after the battle that DC and Seattle had, personally, I move Seattle ahead of St. Louis. I think that Seattle has a little bit more offense, very comparable defense, and they showed that they can hang with DC. That's something that St. Louis, unfortunately for them, was not able to do or was not able to show. They didn't hang with DC when they played them both times. So just in my mind, that puts St. Louis at 3, despite the fact that they're playing this week to even up the odds there for the second playoff spot. I think so it goes DC, Seattle, St. Louis, and then Houston at 4. Houston has some things to clean up, but they're still the class of the South, so to speak. Arlington, right behind Houston. Their defense is inarguably the best in the league. So that's going to keep them in games. Vegas comes after Arlington. Not a lot to say on them. They kept it close with St. Louis, even though they probably shouldn't have. But A.J. McCarron wasn't playing, so I think that plays a little bit against them. San Antonio, even though they came close to Houston, they still don't have very much offense at all. Their defense is good, but it's not quite in Arlington's league, and their offense isn't quite in Vegas's league. So they come in behind Arlington and Vegas at 7, and then Orlando is back to being number 8 until they prove that last week was a fluke. So we've got DC at 1, Seattle at 2, St. Louis at 3, Houston at 4, Arlington at 5, Vegas at 6, San Antonio at 7, and Orlando bringing up the rear at 8.
Our next portion of the show, the AmbushSports.net Players of the Week. This week we got 2 players from offense and defense. The first one is Jordan Temamu. He's a quarterback for the DC Defenders. And then we have Willie Taylor. He's a linebacker for the Arlington Renegades. Jake, I'm sure you want to tell us all about Jordan, right?
Jesus.
I played the 5th.
Oh, man.
I mean, you can hate on the man, but he had a decent week. He had 260 yards with 4 touchdowns, no interceptions.
Yeah.
I don't know. What kind of rushing yards does he have? Did anybody know?
I'm not 100% on it, but I do know that really offensively he was far and away probably the best player this week. I think there were a couple of good offensive performances in terms of wide receivers, but Teamu really was far and away the best performance.
Yeah, he looks really good. I won't say he's the best in the league, but he had a really good week last week, no doubt. Hopefully they can carry forward. They've got a real good rhythm going in DC with their team now. At first it was a little choppy, but now it looks pretty good on offense at least.
I mean, week over week, they just keep improving and getting better. So, I mean, even against Orlando, they had a really good offensive week. So it's not like, this is against the trend or anything. DC is the team to beat, and a lot of that is because of their efficiency on offense.
No doubt. Now let's talk about Willie Taylor. He's a linebacker for the Arlington Renegades. He had 3 tackles, 1 sack, 1 tackle for a loss, 1 interception, and 1 forced fumble. Great player. We've been watching him since week 1. Impactful, makes a difference. We knew this about him in the Renegade defense. So, anything to add?
I mean, the Renegades have at least one player at each of the 3 levels of defense that are, apt to have that kind of performance any given week. He was dominant. I think him and I forget the defensive back's name. He's number 4, but he was the guy that fumbled the kick return early and gave Orlando some good field position. He came back and had a hell of a game. Had an interception with a big return, a couple of big tackles, a couple of big pass breakups. So, it's no surprise that Arlington has a standout on defense, in the voting again, and one that actually wins. So, very good game by him.
Before we close it out today, you guys got anything you want to share about these 2 players?
No, just congratulations to them, and keep it up. Do it again next week.
Love to see it. So that wraps up the show. We'll be traveling to Texas this weekend to watch that game, Drew and I. Should be a good time. Look forward to some Texas barbecue and maybe some Mexican food.
Ooh, sounds good.
We appreciate everybody for listening. Drew, Jake, thank you both for coming and being on. As always, want to thank Ambush Sports. Check them out on social media networks as well as online, ambushsports.net. You can find a bunch of different good sports stuff on there from fans as well as professionals. I want to thank XFLboard.com for putting us on their site and advertising us a little bit. Thank you, XFL Board. As always, I'm Matthew Tyler. This is my host, Drew Wells, Jake Menard. We look forward to another great week of XFL football. And before we close out, guys, if you could tell the people at home where to find you.
Drew Wells on Twitter at Ambush Sports HOU for Houston, at Ambush Sports HOU.
You can find me on Facebook, obviously under my name. You can find me on Twitter at Jake Leonard, JRN. And obviously, I still haven't figured out all the other social stuff for Ambush on my end, so I got to get on that. Outside of Ambush Sports, I'm the editor-in-chief of the Heartland Newsfeed. You can find that online at heartlandnewsfeed.com.
Thank you, fellas, again for coming on. I appreciate you. We've got, 4 games left in total, counting the championship. It's been a ride, so let's finish strong, guys. We appreciate you guys at home listening too. Remember, any feedback you have, anything you want to hear, just message me or anybody here. We'll get it done. Thank you all so much, and until next week, so long.
Peace.